He was on the run for allegedly killing his model girlfriend. Then he was arrested in Mexico for allegedly killing another woman. I'm Elizabeth Millner with Law&Crime. Authorities, including the FBI, searched for Oswaldo Perez-Sanchez for years. Now, while he was on the run, he managed to hide out under a different name and even changed his appearance. He remains in jail in Mexico, but it's only a matter of time before he's brought back to the U.S. We have to go back to 2023 for this case. Tabitha Tazi was living in the entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada, but she was also dating Oswaldo. Now, some reports have said that he has been pretty controlling of her. Then everything came to a head on April 22nd of 2023 when the couple got into an argument. Now, one of the witnesses told police Tabitha was planning to break up with him, but Oswaldo allegedly told her there's no breaking up. And seemingly when confronted, everything just escalated because somehow, someway, Oswaldo decided to allegedly pull out a gun. A witness told police that shortly before the shooting, she heard a woman say, "I want my keys back, get out of my car." During the investigation, detectives found a neighbor's outdoor camera that reportedly captured the entire shooting. The video was just 34 seconds, however, it showed a lot. Now, according to KLAS, the video showed Oswaldo standing outside of a car, then a second later, the camera captured the sound of a gunshot. Oswaldo allegedly tried to remove Tabitha from the car, but she wasn't responsive. Then he approached Tabitha's friend's car and allegedly just stole that car. Las Vegas Metro PD says Oswaldo shot Tabitha and just left her there before officers even arrived. She died in a hospital 2 days after the shooting, but by that time he was already in the wind. The coroner ruled the 26-year-old's death wasn't an accident. It was a homicide. Police were quick to say Oswaldo was the one and only suspect, and obviously they were looking for him. But again, he was gone. Now, Tabitha's family pleaded for investigators to find him and not let Tabitha's case turn cold. Then the FBI joined in the investigation, and Oswaldo made it to a list no one wants to be on, the FBI's most wanted list. According to the description, Oswaldo allegedly confronted Tabitha at her Vegas home, shot her during an argument, then allegedly carjacked a witness and fled. So he had a warrant out for open murder with the use of a deadly weapon, coercion constituting domestic violence with threat or physical force, robbery with the use of a deadly weapon or tear gas, and grand larceny of a motor vehicle. The FBI considered him to be armed and dangerous, even offering a $30,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. The FBI also noted he had ties to either Southern California as well as Mexico. Then a body was discovered earlier this month. According to officials in Mexico, he was arrested on April 15th in connection to the death of another woman, Vivian Carolee. Not many details have been released about Vivian's murder, officials only saying her body was found lifeless the week prior to his arrest, and that Jorge/Oswaldo was charged with femicide and forced disappearance charges. He remains in Mexico for now because now he faces charges in both the U.S. and Mexico. And that process can be kinda dicey. According to reports, a U.S. treaty with Mexico dictates the extradition process. The treaty says criminals arrested in Mexico, should they be convicted in the U.S., not face the death penalty or even a life sentence, meaning the process could take years. Now, as for Tabitha's mom, she issued a statement after her daughter's alleged killer was caught. She wrote, quote, "I am happy and also very sad. I am happy because the killer of my daughter Tabitha got caught, a moment we had been waiting for almost 2 years. I knew in my heart this moment was arriving soon, and it finally did. But I'm also very sad because he took the life of another young woman, Vivian Carolee. Her name deserves to be honored, and we will keep honoring her as well. I am heartbroken that the mother will be going through what I've gone through these last 2 years. I don't desire this on anyone. It is very painful to lose your daughter, and especially through a horrible femicide. No mother deserves this, and I want the family to know that I am here to support them and will fight with them for justice. The fight is not over. Justice is still not completely served. We want him to serve prison time and for him to serve ideally here in Vegas. We are now on another way to see what happens, and we will continue fighting for justice to be completely served. I stand with her family now, and we will fight for justice together. I want him to face charges here in the U.S. I'm joined now by retired FBI agent Colin Schmidt. Colin, always great to have you on, and thank you so much for joining me today. You know, before we get into the arrest of Oswaldo Perez-Sanchez, I want to actually go back to 2023 when he was accused of shooting his girlfriend Tabitha in April of that year. What's your reaction?
Well, it just sounds like it was another example of a domestic abuse issue that got out of hand. And there's likely a history of domestic violence in that relationship. And then it ended up in a catastrophic situation where somebody lost their life.
Yeah, and even Tabitha's friends have suggested as well too that Oswaldo was controlling and never let her breathe inside that relationship. So feel like the motive, and obviously we don't know the clear picture yet, might have been a domestic violence situation as well too. And obviously he is just accused right now. But given that he fled after the shooting and essentially just left her to die, do you think that kind of shows consciousness of guilt?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, if it was a self defense issue, then certainly he would have been the one to call the police and then uh, submit himself to scrutiny by the law enforcement and the authorities, and then answer their questions. But for him to immediately flee to Mexico, like you said, he is just accused. That does show quite a bit of consciousness of guilt and intent to not be prosecuted for the crimes that he committed.
And even in the aftermath of the shooting, he allegedly carjacked a witness, then fled the scene. And sometimes, we cover well planned, I guess you could say in air quotes, well planned out murders, but it doesn't seem like that was the case here. It kind of seems like a crime of passion opportunity. And then he just kind of frantically just fled. What are your thoughts on just, the, I hate to say unplannedness of this, but what are your thoughts on just the aftermath?
Well, your terms, crime of passion is spot on. It appears that there was no planning, no prior intent. It sounds like he reacted to something that she did, and then there's no executive function thinking going on. He just reacted, and then basically his only reaction to his behavior was to flee and to do whatever he could to get out of the country.
And he made a very select list while he was out on the run, and that's obviously the FBI's most wanted list. How does someone get on that list?
Well, generally speaking, you have to have room on the list first. So there's only top 10. So if there is room, then it goes through a process through FBI headquarters, and then divisions will actually submit a candidate to be on the list, or FBI headquarters will actually pick somebody out that's very notorious, or somebody that's done something that everybody in the world knows about, and then they'll make an announcement, put that person on the list, and then at that point, then there's more resources that flows to the field office that has responsibility for capturing that top tenor.
And given that he was on the run in Mexico, do you think that's why the FBI put him on the list, given that he had fled to another country as opposed to staying here domestically?
Well, I think it's just a matter of timing. I think that was part of the equation as far as why they picked him to be on the top 10 list, and then his crime. And then it might have been that at the time he was the best candidate out of maybe one or two or three that were submitted by the field offices. And then fortunately, the FBI was able to use their resources and catch him.
And while he was on the run as well, too, he wasn't going by Oswaldo. He was going by a new name, Jorge N. And officials say he wasn't even necessarily hiding. He was just living out in the open. Are you surprised that he was living just so vicariously, even though he was literally on the FBI's most wanted list and wanted for open murder out in Vegas?
Well, a couple things. He probably didn't even know he was on the list because he was in Mexico. Secondly, many unsophisticated criminals think if they go to Mexico, they're out of reach of the United States authorities. But the FBI and the United States government has a very close working relationship with the Mexican authorities, and so it really is not a panacea to go to Mexico if you commit a crime. The FBI is very well in a great position to catch people down there, as well as the United States Marshal Service, if somebody does go down there after committing a violent crime.
And while he was on the run, he kept pretty busy. It seems like because he's allegedly killed another woman as well too. Does that come as a shock to you, given that his arrest kind of came after the young woman was killed in Mexico, but he wasn't arrested necessarily for Tabitha's murder, is because he was wanted for this other murder. What are your thoughts on just him allegedly killing someone else while on the run?
Well, it's obvious he was predisposed to violence and had no ability to kind of control his emotions. And likely he had a history of violence, whether it be arrests or people that they talked to said he had a violent nature. And it's just another just it's a travesty that another person lost their life because of this monster who went down there and hurt a Mexican citizen.
And do you think had he not been named as a suspect in the death of the woman in Mexico, he would have even been found or captured right now?
I think eventually he would have been captured because, like you said, he was living out out in the open. The Mexican authorities are very good at finding people that we tell them that we're looking for, and based upon the new administration, there's a big push between the two countries right now to collaborate on law enforcement to start securing that border as well as getting all those criminals that are in either country back to face justice.
And what kind of happens next? Vegas Metro PD says that he faces charges in Mexico. He's pending extradition to the U.S. But given just kind of how dicey the situation is, how does all of that work? The extradition back to the U.S. or will he face charges in Mexico first? How does that all work?
Well, he probably won't be extradited because he's a US citizen. He'll be expelled, which is a much, much faster process, but that'll be after the Mexican authorities determine what they want to do with the murder in Mexico. So it might be he has to face justice there first, and then he'll be expelled to the United States to face justice up here. And I'm not sure if Nevada has a death penalty, but based on basically on what he's going to face up here will kind of factor into how they're going to handle the situation.
And I've been seeing reports as well too that Oswaldo was reportedly a dreamer. He came over to the U.S. Undocumented, but obviously has the papers to stay in the U.S. Does that change anything in the process of his whole extradition?
Well, because he's not a US citizen, then it will be an extradition. So that would be a longer process. However, like I said, the Mexican authorities have been very cooperative with the United States in extraditing criminals who have done violent acts or drug trafficking in the United States.
And in terms of investigating cold cases, and I put that kind of in air quotes, and I'm saying cold case as far as Tabitha's case specifically, her death was back in April of 2023. It's now now it is April of 2025, so that's 2 years between the investigation. What kind of all goes into an investigation given this lengthy amount of time? What are investigators kind of looking for in order to solve the case and to get justice? And I'm talking about, for instance, before Oswaldo was captured.
Well, the first thing is just basically you're going to follow all the leads. They're going to talk to everybody that was in their orbit as far as the victim and the assailant. Certainly, you're going to look at the phones. It's always everything starts with the phones now in terms of any kind of a criminal investigation. And then they're also going to interact with the Mexican authorities to see if he's got any family members down there and send out leads and see if they can go and frankly find out if he's in the country or in the area that he's around family or friends. But in this case, with him committing another violent crime, it sounds like he just put himself right on the radar of everybody, and it was basically very straightforward in getting him into custody.
And do you think, given the amount of time, that he had help from others?
Most likely, to go down there, it's not as easy as people thinks. I mean, he still has to have a method of transportation, even though he did a carjacking. He still has to get from the border to wherever he was staying. He has to have money to do that. Likely, he'll have to get a phone from somebody, and he has to eat. He has to live. So somebody's got to help him. And so I'm sure he did have some sort of assistance in Mexico.
And do you think he was in Mexico the entire time, or do you think it's possible maybe he was hiding out in maybe Southern California or in another state for a little amount of time before crossing over into Mexico?
Unlikely, being that he was a dreamer, I think he immediately went back to a place where he was most familiar with, and so as soon as he, in my opinion, as soon as he committed the crime, he probably said the most likely place for him to go is back home, and so he got in a car or carjacked that vehicle and got to the border and got to where he was arrested.
And for Tabitha's family, I can only imagine what they were dealing with or going through throughout this entire ordeal, especially given that her alleged killer had been on the run for so many years. And what are your thoughts, and how does authorities normally respond to just kind of the frustration from victims' families and loved ones during this entire process? Because, despite what we see on television, investigations don't just happen overnight and they aren't quickly solved within the matter of days or hours or anything like that. But what is it like kind of navigating through that, especially knowing that the victims' families just want justice?
Well, most of the time, like the FBI as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office have a victim witness coordinator, and then some big departments as well as and most district attorneys' offices have a victim witness coordinator. So that would probably be the family's point of contact, and that would be the person that would give them updates on the investigation, and or they might have had a relationship with the investigating detective who would also give them updates. And it sounds like they were very active in trying to find out what was going on with the investigation, which is also very important because if they're not showing an interest in the investigation, sometimes it will lag. And frankly, the detectives will move on to something that's a little hotter or a little bit more, has more, more pressure to get solved.
Yeah, and thankfully now it seems like hopefully her family will get some type of closure, and given now the case just has to go through the court process as well too. Colin Schmidt, I want to thank you so much for your time today as well as your insight into this case. Before we sign you off though, where do you think everything goes from here?
Well, I think it's going to be a very long process, like you said, and then also in terms of domestic violence, see something, say something. So if her friends or family had an idea that this was happening, it's unfortunate that there was not an intervention before this happened. But everybody has to be on the lookout for violent behavior by anybody, for that matter.
And there's a number of resources to those who are listening out there to help those who have been suffering through abuse as well too. Again, Colin Schmidt, I want to thank you so much for your time today and your insight into this case. Thank you again.
Thank you.
In her statement, Tabitha's mother, Regina, also wrote she plans to have a celebration for her daughter's life that'll take place this Thursday. It's unclear if Oswaldo Perez-Sanchez entered a plea yet, but again, at this time, he still remains in custody in Mexico. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.